Welcome, you're watching Kaleidoscope Srilanka Live News Capsule.
According to the EFL, 27% of birds, 66% of amphibians, 56% of mammals, 49% of freshwater fish, 59% of reptiles and 44% of flowering plant species are threatened by invasive alien species. Our biodiversity and everything that it brings us, tourism, economic advantages, agriculture, health, is being invaded. The Kumanavillu is one such, where the 500 acres of rich wetland is now threatened. The Federation of Environmental Organizations and the Parrotfish Collective are now on a mission to restore the habitat of the Kumanavillu, which they started this week. The co-founder of the Parrotfish Collective, Vinod Malwatte, gives more detail.
Welcome, Vinod, once again to Kaleidoscope. How bad is the invasive species problem in Sri Lanka?
So it's actually much worse than you'd imagine. So for example, when we look at our protected areas, a lot of them are overrun with invasive species. Udawalawe National Park, for example, is about 50% of it overrun. We worked in Lunugam National Park, which is now part of Yala, and about 20% of the grassland was taken over. And then Min area, one of our premium elephant grazing habitats, about 20% of the grassland there was also taken over by invasive species. At the time we had an intervention, and then we've also looked at other parks. For example, we work in Baskamua, and in Baskamua we've seen there's 8 main water bodies there, and out of the 8, majority of them were actually covered with invasives, completely almost, some of them. So we're actually working there as well.
What's the impact these invasive species have on the habitat?
So it depends on the different types of species. So some of them, the more terrestrial ones, they crowd out a lot of the native species that grazers like elephants and deer will come eat. They also will take over large spots of grassland, again not allowing animals to come through and forage. And of course, then you have your aquatic species like water hyacinth and salvinia, and those really clog up canals. We see it in Colombo, we see it across multiple reservoirs in the country, and those really clog up the water body at the top, not allowing sunlight to go down. So you have algal blooms, you have a ecosystem that's devoid of any life at the bottom because the sunlight isn't doing its thing, right? It's just carpeted by these invasives.
So you've started a cleanup at Kumanavillu. Why?
We saw a drop of numbers in the birds, so we started looking into it, and we realized that a native creeper actually, which was acting almost in an invasive sense, had taken over some of the kirilla trees, mangrove trees that birds were nesting in. So that was causing the drop in the birds, and then we also noticed the proliferation of water hyacinth across the open water, which then meant that again the ecosystem wasn't working at its optimal, so the birds weren't really coming through. We've also noticed the shifting of the river mouth. The Moya cutters kind of shifted, so because of that the ecosystem has kind of gone from a brackish water ecosystem, which is a mix of salt and fresh water, into a predominantly freshwater ecosystem. So it's kind of changed the makeup of it as well. So what we're trying to do is actually restore the Kumanavillu to its past glory, right? And the idea, the conservation intervention there is to take off some of the creepers and then cut them at base level, let them. We're not pulling them off the trees because of the labor costs, so we're actually leaving them on the trees for them to dry and fall off after that, and we're clearing some of the water hyacinth as well. We did a pilot a while back. Earlier this year, and we've received really good feedback, and the birds have actually come back themselves to nest, which is really exciting. And we've already got the section that we cleared. We've had life returning, so it's hopefully the new section that we'll clear, there'll be more birds coming back.
Now, starting off something like this, there are obviously challenges. What are they?
Funds is a big one. Funding, trying to get, and then trying to actually mobilize on the ground. It's not easy work. So it's actually just trial and error, trying to understand what the most effective way of clearing these invasive species are, and then coming back again to the maintenance cost. And it's not a one-time thing. Invasives, they will come back time and time. So it's also keeping up that maintenance. So it is very long-term work.
And how are you planning to get the funding?
So we've done a couple of things. We've applied for grants, which is the more traditional way of doing things, but we've also had a couple of crowdfunding campaigns out to the public, and we've been really fortunate amongst the public. A lot of people have donated towards the cause. as well as trying to reach out to the corporates. Anyone who is looking to corporates have already come on board for some of the other, but more there's so much work to be done. So the more players we can have involved, the better.
How do these species come into being?
So different invasives are different. So for example, water hyacinth was brought by the governor's wife to Sri Lanka, I think in 1906 as an ornamental, because it looked nice. So that's how water hyacinth came to Sri Lanka. Gauze, which is invasive that we see in Horton Plains, which we're also doing some work on, was again, it's brought to Haggala. The botanical gardens next door. So it's also like, it also travels via air on animals. So there's a lot of them are of ornamental value, really. And then after that, get into the ecosystem and just start taking over.
So is it possible to eradicate these in the long term?
100%, I'm not sure, to be honest. It is and that's why I said coming back, the maintenance is super important. But I'm not sure 100% is tough from within a landscape, because it is a living landscape, right? You do have, animals going from one waterhole to another waterhole, birds, eating a berry, coming and pooping somewhere, and then that sprouts there. So it is tough work, but what we can do is obviously minimize the spread of it. So in Min area, the work that we've been doing, from 20% of the grassland, we've actually brought it down through maintenance and careful, meticulous work to almost 0.01%. So we've really seen a huge reduction, but that we've been working for multiple years on that every year, diligently on taking those plants out. So it is possible within certain pockets.
Limited resources don't allow you to do this,
Limited
right?
resources don't, of course. It is tough, and one of the things we've been really lucky with is working with the local population. So we work with the local populations around the park, so they've been superb, and it also gives them an alternate source of livelihood and also deeper appreciation for the park, because sometimes they have negative interactions with the park, because they see the park as a place that they can't really go to, and human, like elephants coming out, and they see human elephant conflict, things like that. So they see the negative side. So sometimes it's nice to take them into the park, and they are getting some kind of economic benefit through projects like this coming through. They get to spend time in the park. There's an opportunity for education there as well, and we've started through some of our projects working with kids in the neighborhood, and then really taking that to the next level. And the gateway has actually been the invasive species removal projects, which have facilitated us engaging with the community, that has led to other interesting aspects.
Besides what you mentioned, any particular success stories?
So the Min area one is a huge success story. Lunugam Vihara, which is now Yala Block 6, that one as well. So we had about 900 hectares that we were looking at, and we've almost completed about 750 hectares of that. So only a little bit more to go. I mean, if the Horton Plains is going pretty well as well. And obviously the Kumanavillu, the pilot was very successful so far, and we're hoping that will yield some positive results from this second stage as well. Vasgamua, that's another one. We've cleared out of the 8 tanks that were kind of carpeted with invasives. We've cleared 4 of them to very good success. We've seen a little bit of maintenance is still required, but the animals are returning, which is the main thing. And I think with the invasive species work, the main thing is actually creating optimal habitats within national parks, these so-called human designated protected areas, which we demarcate on maps, right? So these are safe zones for animals to dwell in. So if we can facilitate those safe zones for them to be in these protected areas, then hopefully it minimizes the need for them to venture into human areas, right? So then they've got that optimal habitat to live in. Yes, they will come out, but at least their homes that we've demarcated are intact and working at an optimal.
So thank you, Vinod, for all you're doing to make life better for all of us. Did you know that Kaleidoscope is on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn? Remember to subscribe, follow, and like us for more.